Good afternoon, everyone. Wonderful. My name is Dirk Hargraves, and I'm with Community Merchants USA, which is a resource, an online resource that you can find at www.communitymerchantsusa.com. It's a resource created by payment networks, companies, community banks, and other financial services institutions to provide small business owners and advocacy organizations such as USACC and your affiliates with tools about how to use electronic payments to grow, start, and manage your businesses. And we've been doing outreach around the country to organizations such as the Small Business Association, or Administration rather, during their National Small Business Week that was earlier this summer. We were in Pittsburgh, California, Texas, and Washington, D.C. And one of the things we've heard is that we're interested in electronic payments. This is from small business owners, but we're really interested in mobile payments. We understand that 87% of the population around the world has phones, and about 55% of those have smartphones. And I think, just kind of, if I can digress a little bit, I understand that Verizon had a workshop earlier this morning, and Google had one as well. And I believe that technology and using mobile resources is something that you guys are really understanding. This is something that your members and your customers are very interested in and wanting to know more about that. Well, today we have some experts who can provide you with some information. And again, my name is Dirk, and we're going to have I believe, a nice discussion on the future of mobile payments, what small businesses need to know. And I'd want to introduce, without taking too much time, our panelists. To my left and your right, we have Carlos Navarro, who's with Elevon, and Mark Krager from Visa. Carlos, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Carlos Navarro. I'm the president of Latin America for Elevon. I was formerly the chief marketing officer. I've been with the company almost 6 years now.
Good afternoon, I'm Mark Krager. I'm with Visa. I'm head of our emerging product sales. Specialize in taking a lot of our new products, particularly in the mobile space, from concept to commercialization through our issuers and acquirers.
So both of these guys kind of said a mouthful, and I want you, if you have questions, which I'm sure you will, feel free. We're going to have a Q&A session, and I want to get through our portion because we really want to hear from you. Again, I started off by saying mobile payments is something that we believe small businesses are interested in. And I want to turn some questions over to both Mark and Carlos. As a first step, can you give us kind of the ecosystem of how it works when you, as a consumer, if you wanted to go to a merchant and purchase something with a phone, how does that work?
There's a variety of things that have to happen for the consumer to be enabled for payments with their mobile device. It takes a connection with their issuer and able to transfer the credentials that they have on their card onto their mobile phone. There's a variety of ways that they can pay at the point of sale, and from a merchant perspective, you're probably feeling some of that pain on all the different technologies that are bombarding you, whether it's the different dongles that come in or the barcode scanners or NFC. We promote NFC. We think that's probably the broadest spectrum in terms of both cardholder awareness, merchant enablement, although it's pretty low from a percentage-wise, it is growing. And then we're also looking at the mobile phone enablement. Now about 70%, almost 80% of the phones that are being sold today, with the exception of the Apple products, are NFC enabled. I do have an Apple phone. It is NFC enabled through a case. But we look at kind of that three-legged stool where we have to have support from the merchant, and in terms of terminal enablement, we have to have awareness from the consumer and a desire for them to want to pay that way. And we obviously have to have support from the issuer to enable that phone. So a lot of those need to rise together, but we see that gaining significant traction in the next couple of years.
Carlos, any follow-up on that?
Yeah, no, and I think the other piece of that too is as we're coming into another technology jump where you're going to start looking at consumers coming into the different places of business from a merchant standpoint with not only NFC but cloud-based solutions, whether it's a mobile wallet like the V.me product from Visa, and understanding how they can take advantage of that secure transaction capability as well.
So I guess maybe by a show of hands, are anyone in the audience using mobile payments acceptance devices like a Square or Intuit? Or okay, we've got Okay, great. So don't have to convert you guys, but going back, what is the value proposition? Why not just use cash? Why not, what's the outlay for that?
Well, aside from the fact that it doesn't help either one of our businesses to use cash.
Of course not.
You know, there is a cost to doing business, and you know, as consumers, we are all out there, and we go to businesses when we want the ease of use and the ease of payment, and cash is obviously a potential use or one of the payment types. But at the end of the day, the majority of my transactions as a consumer take place electronically. So from a consumer standpoint, they're asking for more and more ways to take electronic payments. And from a merchant standpoint, you know, there is a cost to doing business on the cash standpoint. One is fraud. Two is the fact that you got to then take all that cash and transport that cash and go to the bank and deposit the money and things of that nature, which no one takes that into account from a time and a trouble standpoint. And the reality is that for what we see from a fraud standpoint, the majority of fraud in small businesses is employee related. It's not so much a transaction fraud taking place on a card. It's a fairly secure environment, particularly in the small business environment. So there's a cost to doing business from a cash standpoint that's internal, and then more importantly is what is the consumer's choice that they want to make.
I would echo Carlos's comments. You know, we've done a lot of studies in different industries and different merchants categories, and it's easy to take a look at, and I'm charging somebody $100 and I get $100 cash, or I get a check for $100, and assume that that's payment in full versus what you might see after settlement through your acquirer. But the reality is, whether you're paying somebody a wage to count back change effectively, or you're taking a card swipe, it's all about what the consumer wants, what your customers are looking to do, and what you're doing to appeal to them to bring in more business. And I think at the end of the day, it's all about customer choice. It's going to drive that payment choice.
Now, one of the issues about attracting and retaining customers, of course, we want the ease of use. Mobile payments helps that out. Can you guys talk a little bit about loyalty programs and why that is connected in this space?
So we see mobile really kind of bringing all of those components together. So somebody pulling out their card or pulling out cash is a different type of payment than somebody that has perhaps a mobile wallet enabled on their mobile device, and that's all they're leaving home with. I realize that's probably maybe a couple years down the road before all those planets align. But if I can walk into a store, I can be notified when I'm in that store that there's a special going on or there's some type of deal that would be worthwhile to me. It's an opportunity for the merchant to reach out and really customize that experience for me. If I use that mobile device to pay, my loyalty programs are already built in, so I'm not dealing with a lot of key fobs or trying to punch in my phone number or other things like that. There's a way that we can bring all that convenience onto a mobile device and have it meaningful for the consumer.
Yeah, and I think to take it a little further, I heard a statistic that the average time in the United States to report a lost wallet is 3 days, mainly because of the torture that you go through when you lose a wallet. The average time to report a stolen or lost cell phone is 37 minutes. So, I wish my kid would wait 3 days because then it would save money on texting. But so when you look at it from that mobile experience around the loyalty and the rewards, and there's a difference, having that capability either through your acquirer or through companies like Visa, where not only can we provide loyalty and offers when they're in the merchant store or a merchant's place of business, but more importantly, when you start talking about they're near the merchant store, they are in the general vicinity, they have bought an ancillary product recently on their Visa card, and now they're sitting there saying, wait, you bought this is a natural potential affinity to make an additional purchase. Okay, and so to be able to drive consumers to a place of business first and foremost with an offer and drive that loyalty, but then once they're in there, reward them for that in a non-intrusive or frictionless way of doing it, so you don't have 17 little things stuck on. I have 3 keys and 7 fobs on there is not the way to do it long term.
Now you raised some issues potentially. Some folks might not want to be tracked or feel like they're being tracked or followed. Are there privacy concerns, or is there opt-in or opt-out provisions that would be along with these? Sure.
I mean, obviously, all of these offers are capable in an opt-in or an opt-out fashion. I personally like opt-in. My CFO likes opt-out.
Right.
But the reality is that privacy is of the utmost concern. Whether it's us, and I'm sure Visa has just as long of a mandate on what to do there. But more importantly, we have to provide that capability to the merchants, right? It's one thing for us to have opt-in or opt-out. It's more important that as we provide loyalty and rewards and payment options and programs to the merchants, that they have that capability to affect that with their consumer, right? Because at the end of the day, if you are getting spammed or your privacy is being violated, it's more than likely you're not going to think, oh, let me go get the acquirer, because no one knows what that word is. What they realize is that, the cupcake store keeps sending me emails, and I keep telling them not to send me emails. So right. We need to give them those capabilities to be able to do those types of marketing ins and outs.
From our perspective, we're very much about the consumer choice and allowing them to choose what types of programs and offers are important to them. We've done a variety of programs over the years, and I'll give you an example. We did a pilot program with the Gap and the different Gap brands, and that's an opportunity where it needs to be a value for the consumer, so they've opted in to receive particular offers from that type of merchant. And from the Gap perspective, they don't necessarily want to give the same offer to everybody. So Carlos has not been into Banana Republic for 6 months. They're going to send him an offer for 40% off. Derek has been in there every month because he's got a great need for clothing or whatever. Maybe they send him an offer for 20% off. But I mean, the point is, it's a value to both of them as consumers to receive an offer from a merchant that they've already identified that's important to them, and it's a value to the merchant themselves to be able to target the consumers that they really want to attract and give the type of discount that they think is necessary to drive that incremental volume.
So it sounds like in any scenario, we're trying to match the consumer's demand with the merchant's ability to process that demand in a way that's as frictionless as possible. With that, I have a question in terms of Hispanic business owners and actually minority and small business owners in general who deal with underbanked or non-bank folks that don't have bank accounts. How can they deal with those type of consumers in a mobile world?
Sure. Let's go first. So we are especially in tune with what's happening in the unbanked and underbanked segments. We've developed a very vibrant prepaid business over the years, and we've also taken additional steps purchasing a company actually in South Africa called Fundamo. And their whole benefit is enabling people that are more likely to have a mobile phone but not have a payment card to allow them to add payment credentials and the capability of accessing more merchant locations and transacting in a safe and convenient way. It's quite possible that most of the folks in an unbanked environment are moving to a prepaid solution, hopefully from Visa, that allows them that flexibility that they haven't had before. So in many cases, we're enabling through our financial institutions their first entry into the financial services space, giving them that safe way to transact, whether it's a merchant in person or whether it's now all of a sudden giving them access to be able to do more simple things that we take for granted, like paying for gas at the pump or shopping online on a website. They now have a vehicle to do that. So we actually have a product, whether it's credit, debit, prepaid, or even commercial products that are appropriate for each of our customers.
Yeah, the Fundamo acquisition was really amazing. That's a really, really cool product. And obviously, the reality is that for most merchants, their relationship, unless they're large, is not directly with Visa. It is through their acquirer and their bank where they receive these services. So it's incumbent upon us as we start to look at how do we enable these different alternative payments so that they can take advantage of that, right? And that's where the competition comes in at the merchant level, is between us and our competitors to say, yes, not only do we take Visa and the traditional cards, but when you start looking at the underbanked or the unbanked, can we take some of these alternative payment methodologies or mechanisms and allow that to work through the same frictionless piece? Because it's one thing to enable, a prepaid debit card, but or another alternative payment mechanism. But if now suddenly that becomes a significant pain point for the merchant on the back end, that is not what you want to have happen, right? So if they're used to getting funded every night or every other night, we want all the funding to come through that mechanism, as opposed to, well, yeah, we'll give you your Visa money and take care of that tonight, but this other thing will take a week. Then that becomes something that they don't want to do and they don't want to encourage people to do, which puts consumers off.
So it's obviously we want the merchants, again, get into this merchants and consumers actually, or everyone in this ecosystem to be able to the merchants provide the products and services to their consumers as quickly as possible. The merchants want to be able to get paid from you guys as quickly as possible. What are some kind of ground rules of what a merchant should look for when they're looking to maybe new technology or a service that you guys provide?
Sure. Again, I think in this scenario, their relationship is really more at the acquirer or the processor level than it is directly with Visa from a payment standpoint. So, you know, first and foremost, with all of the small businesses, how do you engage, right? So, are we engaging with Hispanic businesses in Spanish? Do we have contracts in Spanish? Do we have sales in Spanish? Do we have support in Spanish? So those are the types of things we provide them. I'm sure most of our competitors do as well, you know, hopefully not as well as we do, in multiple different languages, right? And all of us are consumers. If we happen to own a small business, we act like consumers. We want to, when we do studies, and I'm sure you've done it, I know you've done them, most small business owners want to be treated like a consumer. They want that direct relationship because they're putting in 18-hour days. Right? It's not I'm phoning it in for 4 hours from my corporate headquarters, you know, when I'm getting off the golf course. It's they're in there 12 hours, 15 hours, 18 hours a day. They want to be treated as in a direct one-to-one consumer environment. So they choose how they want to engage with us. They choose how we need to service them, and we need to provide that in language capability. Obviously, we need to fund in the currency of choice. Or in the currency of legal record. But they want to engage with us in Spanish, they want to engage with us in French, or they want to engage with us in Portuguese. We provide that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that is where some of these differences come in with some of the newer players that are coming into the space that are technology driven, which there's some phenomenal technology coming out there. But the reality is the way you engage with them is through a Twitter or an email. Well, if you're down and you can't get to a human being, or you have a problem and you can't get to a human being, regardless of whether that's via chat or whether it's on the phone, that's a problem. So we provide those types of services, and that's what they should look for, is can I engage with this company 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in the manner that I need to? And what we're finding in a lot of small businesses, particularly in first generation or second generation minority-owned businesses, is that inventory control is the 18-year-old son or daughter. Technology services in my house is the 11-year-old, but it's the 18, 21-year-old daughter or son who's in there helping mom and dad with this. So you know, we have to engage in multiple different ways.
So I'm just putting a quick plug in again for the resource that folks like Visa and Carlos are providing for all of you, which is what I'm here for, Community Merchants USA. The website again is www.communitymerchantsusa.com. And I mention that because there's a tool called Fee Seeker that sort of like a progressive where you can put in your criterion and it'll weigh different processors on costs. Now the other variables that Carlos had mentioned, you have to take that into account as well, because I don't know that it has that normative kind of metric.
It's not that deep on the metric side, but the reality is this. In this environment, you can't control, as a merchant, the mechanism with which a consumer decides to pay with. And they will come to you with a prepaid card. They will come to you with a regular Visa card. They will come to you with a Platinum Visa card. And so we need to educate and provide education to the merchants, which we do, which is how do you best minimize the cost associated with this process. There is a cost to it. There's an incredible benefit to it. Then you can bring more consumers to you, whether that's in a brick and mortar environment in a store, or as more and more companies actually do build out websites where they can do things in an e-commerce manner. You have to translate. You have to transact in an electronic fashion, okay? And so, you know, you have to ensure that we educate and provide the services. It's not just what's the lowest rate on this one particular type of card, because there's a myriad of other things that to take into account.
So just kind of, and I want to open it up to the audience shortly, but in terms of some of the popular technology out there, we're not choosing any favorites, but if you're looking at Square or PayPal has their triangle now, I believe.
About the open enrollment period. It's an exciting...
Pardon me? Okay, sorry about that. what are some of what makes these products attractive, and what are the things, that, not picking one or another, but kind of things they should look out for as well. One of the, and I maybe I'm giving you a leading question, but if I were a small business owner, I wouldn't want to spend a lot of money for technology that's going to be obsolete or not scalable, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I'll answer it. Then obviously, you guys see a lot of this, and you have investments in a lot of these companies. So, from our perspective, what we're mainly concerned about is ensuring that that obsolescence doesn't take place. Okay, I'm old enough to remember barely there was VHS and there was Betamax. Okay, and consumers chose who won. All right, so we want to ensure that we can enable that decision to take place out in the market, okay? And the reason why a lot of these products are out there, they're very, very interesting pieces of product and technology that make running a small business easier. We have options on that, Square has them, Google has them, whatever. And it's what's easiest for you. So we want to make sure that we support Square, that we support Intuit. And more importantly, it's not just that front end piece, but what we're seeing is a lot of integration on the back end. So as merchants sit down and say, hey, I'm going to be using QuickBooks, I'm going to be using Peachtree Accounting or whatever it is, how do we integrate the information that we're providing back as an acquirer to them in a fashion that goes directly into their accounting software or directly into their billing system, so that now they can use that and save money on the back end, right? I mean, we talk about the cost of doing business on the front end. There's regulatory compliance issues that small business owners and every business owner has to report on to the IRS. And so we spend a lot of money ensuring that there's a way for them to get that data, and instead of having to spend 5 hours with their accountant, they just provide them a printout because it's already integrated into their piece, and that saves them money in the back end.
I would say our concern is a consistent acceptance experience. When somebody goes into a merchant, they want to be able to use their Visa card, understand that that transaction is going to be processed in a safe and secure way. We have to do everything to maintain that integrity. And I would say that the table stakes for anybody getting into the payment space is having a network that's secure and run similar to VisaNet. We don't take that for granted. Merchants don't take that for granted, and really the consumers don't. When they give their card, they don't want to go through the hassle of compromise. It's challenging from a payments perspective on all levels. If you look at everybody that's coming into the space thinking they understand payments and have the bigger, better mousetrap, from our perspective, we understand the pain that you go through as a merchant to want to future-proof that terminal decision that you may be making, let's say, every 5 to 7 years, and trying to come up with a technology that's going to support that. We look at technology that's going to really scale across all categories, across all merchants, across all of our issuers, all of our acquiring partners, so that the consumer that's walking into your store is not different every day, and they're not the expectations are not different. We can't. We're not doing anything to stop that in terms of new solutions that come out, but we are looking to support the ones that make the most sense, that can process that transaction securely, and also provide you some scale with your customer base.
And Mark touched on it briefly, and I realize it's totally not sexy. But security is where they're spending millions and where we're spending millions, because that's what will kill a small business is a breach. Okay. So we spend millions to ensure that our systems are encrypted, that they're PCI compliant, that our merchants become PCI compliant, and we provide benefits and services to them to get to that standard of PCI compliance. And I realize that's like saying I'm buying a new car and I'm not going to worry about the cool radio, I'm going to worry about the airbag. No one does that. Everyone assumes that it's there until it doesn't go off. Okay. And so that's the reality of it. So we try to ensure that all merchants understand what we're doing, what they're expected to do, but more importantly, then what benefit or what service do we provide to them to ensure that if a data breach does occur, that we have a mechanism for them to not lose their business, that we have a mechanism to help them go through that process, whether it's from a forensic standpoint, from a cost standpoint, from a process standpoint, and walk them through that. Because while rare, they do occur, and they need to be aware of that. That's not what you want to hear when you're trying to buy the car, right? If you get into an accident, the 27 airbags will go off. I don't want to hear about that. I want to hear about the leather seats and the radio, all right? But we want to talk about that because we're both spending millions to ensure that capability.
This is good. In the interest of time, I want to kind of switch it and go to the audience. And Emily, if you would use the mic, let me actually ask a question of the audience. The young lady who raised her hand who uses Square. I don't want to put you on the spot, but can you tell me what your business or what chamber you're with and what your experience has been?
I actually just signed up so I could try it and see what it was like because I'm still confused on how it all works. I was very interested in using it for when we have our networking events and you have people show up and say, do you take credit cards? And I'm like, no, I have to go to my computer and put in your credit card. So I wanted to do something different. And I have used it on a couple of occasions. And, my question was, I still don't have a full understanding of how it still goes into that account, but they take a couple of cents off of it, and then does my account take a couple of cents off of it too? So it's just still a little confusing. So I'm still testing it out. I like it, and I actually ran into a member who was out in a flea market type environment, and she was using it, and she's like, I love it. I'm so glad, that this is accessible to me, and I see it.
I think it's great that you're trying it, and I think that proves the point on the comment you made about the flea market, right? You would think that would be a cash environment, and yet if you look at the people who are really driving sales in that world, they're realizing I'm willing to give up a percentage of something to get a bigger total percentage, and that's, I think, the experience that we keep talking about in the consumer choices, that's going to be the case. And we see a lot of that when we go out and we do consumer road shows and we look at things, and we'll go to some of these art shows and everything, and you're starting to see a move away from cash, because who has $500 on them to buy something at an art show or a check, or actually where I just saw it the last time was at my son's baseball tournament. At the end of the thing, they had a photographer there for 4 days, and they finished and they had thousands of pictures sitting there. And I have no money on me, and they're like, no problem. They pull out, and actually I could tell it was the triangle, so I knew it was into it. And they were just taking credit cards for their $4 and $5 purchases, but then it was painless. I could take my pictures and not have to worry about it. So it was great, and that's what I think the consumers are going to drive us to do.
That's great.
First of all, I just compliment you on the kind of taking that technology and experimenting with that. We have a great partnership with Square. We look at them expanding acceptance in locations that never would have taken a Visa product before, whether it's individual merchants, whether it's garage sales, whether it's farmers markets, all that environment, that mobile point of sale, we see a huge spike, and it's all about customer convenience. But again, going back to Carlos's point, we've invested in a network to make sure that the data that each individual merchant or individual is taking on that Square device is secure, so that they're swiping that card, that data is secure, they're not worried about compromise, we're not worried from a system perspective, and certainly from an acquiring perspective.
I actually signed up 2 members using the Square.
Oh, great. Great. And I would say that probably the biggest user of Square right now is Starbucks. There's somewhat a little bit of an anomaly because there's not too many merchants that are selling a drug that people want once or twice a day, every day. But there's also a loyalty component that's baked into the Starbucks experience. But we see that, kind of training the consumer from an ease of using payment, not having to have cash, whether it's for $3 or whether it's for $300, it's spur of the moment, and it's making it easy.
And that I would add, and I'm sure you would agree, that had not folks had these devices, some customers would walk away. You're losing business. Right. Next question.
So actually keeping the question on Starbucks and other loyalty programs like Belly Card, 5 Stars, App Card, which are less the multi-bronze loyalty program, but more replacing the actual punch cards. I wanted for you to speak a little bit about that. Starbucks has both, yes, Square that started off as a mobile POS and now is jumping into the loyalty game as well. And then you have the other players like the Belly Cards and 5 Stars that are eventually going to jump into the mobile POS as well. Where do you see those guys converging, and what do you think about Belly Card? I think one of the big problems today for small merchants is that they're not able to connect their POS to transaction. and therefore you're not able to build a real CRM where you know your customer and you can send those, you know, that example that you put up with the Gap, that's 60% off if you haven't been here for 6 months, et cetera, et cetera.
Some great questions. He wants to.
Yeah, I'll start. I'll pass to Carlos. But I'd say just real quickly from a merchant connectivity perspective, what we're looking at is that partnership with our issuers, with our acquirers, and with the merchant. So it's not just a single solution. If you look at the Square connectivity with Starbucks, there is a card that's associated with that Square account from the individual. So the Starbucks knows who that is. There's a reload component that they can reward and identify that customer. That's not always the case when you just walk into any place that is accepting and using Square there's not necessarily a loyalty program. I'm not familiar with the Belly card, so I'll kind of turn that over to Carlos. But I think the individual merchant has to determine what level of connectivity they want with their customer and determine what value they want to communicate. And I think what we're offering through point of sale, mobile point of sale, and particularly on a mobile device that can communicate with that cardholder and is not dependent on, you know, a paper statement that they may never open. But how can we accelerate the communication between that transaction with the merchant and with their customer to make that meaningful?
Yeah, and there's a lot of them like Belly, and there's Punch, and there's 50 million of them that are popping up all the time. And I think the first is that we as acquirers have to enable those pieces for the merchant to a certain extent, because you're right. Without that, how do you make that last mile link between that transaction and not only the loyalty and the CRM, but also the funding, right? And we were having a discussion earlier about there's a difference between rewards and loyalty. And there are programs out there for rewards, and there are programs out there for loyalty. And the question is, how do you link those two together? Because they are dramatically different engagements and interactions with a customer, with a consumer. So, you know, how do you build a loyalty program out? How do you build rewards out? I think what will happen is a lot of these are going to converge. Most of them are going to die. Most of them are going to die. They're just... The consumers have not chosen what their rewards or loyalty program is going to be of choice, and I think where that convergence will come into play is as we get to a technology we really haven't talked about a lot. As we start getting into some of the things around a mobile wallet, and that capability comes out, and you look at like V.me and their ability to take their offers and deliver it through that, and that's where you're putting in your secure information, and now you're getting offers and things of that nature through that network. I think that has a much bigger chance of significant growth, aside from very specific loyalty and rewards programs, aka a Starbucks or something of that nature. Okay. You know, the airlines are a great example of it, right? I mean, that's true loyalty, and that was the example we were talking about earlier. We were talking about outside was, you know, you look at a rental car place. You go rent from Avis, and at the end they're like, oh, here's 250 miles on Delta. Well, I got a reward from Avis, but my loyalty is to Delta. And if Avis, you know, doesn't give me my upgrade, or the experience is bad on Avis, I will go to Hertz, and I'm still going to get my 250 miles on Delta, because my loyalty's to there, and I'm getting a random reward here. And it's loyalty that'll drive the consumer behavior. So that's what we're working on. We're working on how do we integrate that into an environment where the majority of small businesses do not have point of sale. You know, today they have a black box. Okay, tomorrow they're going to move to this, right? And so then how do we make that without affecting the transaction? That moment of transaction has to be frictionless as possible. So how can we do this all on the back end so that then they have that capability? Because if I have to make a consumer fill out 43 things at the point of sale, I'll be like, you know what, I'll give you the $10 in cash, just leave me alone, and then you don't ever come back, right? So that's what we're working on.
This is good. I know we have lunch coming up, and I applaud you guys for staying at this very sexy topic, but I really want to get a few more questions in if we could. Is anyone interested in hearing a little bit more about the mobile wallets? We could go into that a little bit. Well, I hear a nod, so tell us a little bit more about that.
Oh, sure. So we launched a product called V.me almost a year ago, and we're developing what we believe to be a pretty substantial group of merchants that are addressing a consumer pain point. And it's not necessarily at the point of sale today, because quite honestly that swipe works really well. but it's about shopping at different merchant websites where you have to establish a new username and a new password, and you have to enter all your billing information and all your shipping information. You may only want to buy one thing from that website. And so from a merchant pain point, we see a tremendous abandonment in that shopping cart. People will shop online, they'll put stuff in their shopping cart, and then they get prompted for all this information, which, by the way, is about 42 fields of information you have to fill in for each individual website. And we have taken that away and added in v.me. So when someone is ready to pay, they use the same username and the same password across multiple sites, and they are able to confirm payment. They're able to change their form of payment. We, of course, accept Visa, into the v.me wallet, but we also accept the other major payment networks. It takes food out of the mouths of my children, but that's okay. And then from a merchant perspective, we really kind of enable that transaction to happen quickly. And quite honestly, it's similar to a PayPal experience, but we don't leave the merchant website. It's on the merchant side at all times. From a issuer perspective, the card that you use as a consumer is identified. The artwork from that particular card that you have in your wallet, so your physical card looks just like your card online. It's a very easy, simple way to shop. And so we eventually see that going into other channels, but again, our focus right now is addressing what we think is a huge pain point for the consumer, their desire to shop online, and more importantly, what we're seeing is more consumers shopping with their mobile device. So if you're shopping on a tablet, or you've got a full-size monitor and a keyboard, not so much of a problem to enter those 42 fields. When you're trying to deal with that on a smartphone screen that's significantly smaller, huge abandonment. So we want to address the the merchant issue of trying to get those consumers to complete that transaction, and we want to make it easier for the consumer to shop at more and more merchant locations in an online environment.
And I think the other change, or what you'll see with the mobile wallets, is what we're focusing in on not only is the e-commerce experience, but how do we take that same e-commerce experience and provide it in store? Okay, and that's really what we're spending a ton of time and millions of dollars on, is to enable our network so that, if you go buy something from, Dick's Sporting Goods and you can put in your v.me, your mobile wallet information there, you should be able to do the same thing at the point of sale. Okay, and so how do we enable that? Now that's harder at the larger, national chains because they've got to integrate into their whole POS system. It's on us to enable that at the small merchant level. Once we can enable that at the terminal or on the electronic point of sale information or applications, then it's the same experience whether you're going into their website or into their physical store, and you put in two things and you're done. And that's where it's going to head to, right? I mean, that is where I think this is going to go to. It might take a little bit of a generational issue, but I'm slowly getting my parents off of checks, and they may get to the wallet, they may not, but we will, and our children definitely will.
My parents will use ATMs.
Yeah, right.
We have time for about one or two more questions. I'll ask one of them, and that's kind of a basic, something that's been going on in my head in terms of the mobile experience. It seems to me if you're walking into a store as a consumer, it frees the merchant up from spending time at a register. It promotes the ability to buy more things and the merchant versus the administrative part of checking out. Is that something that you see in this mobile space?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, if you've gone into an Apple store, you realize you can check out everywhere. The concept of a queue to check out at a cash register can go away. Okay, and so how do we see that everywhere? I think it's going to get even more ubiquitous. I think you're going to get to a point where you can figure out, and you can do this in an Apple store today. You can go with your Apple App Store app and scan the UPC code and walk out with it. Right? Now you can't do it with a $2,000 Mac, because that's a fraud problem. But no, without a doubt, that is going to occur. Without a doubt, that experience. First of all, it's a better experience. Right? You don't feel like, let me queue up, get to an old cash register and do this. They can help you out right where you're at. They can check you right there. You mean to email you your receipt. All that capability is there. So that's what we're building into our products and into our services. And that really is at the consumer and the merchant level.
Mark, you want to add?
I think this kind of dovetails a little bit on what we talked about earlier. It's all about the merchant addressing the consumer the way they want to pay and addressing those consumer pain points, whether that's in an online channel or whether it's at the actual physical point of sale. What can they do to help expedite that transaction so it's better for the merchant, it's a better customer experience, and it makes that customer want to come back?
I think that's almost a wrap. I just want to make sure of giving the audience one last chance to ask questions of these experts. Going once?
Lunch.
Okay, so can we thank Mark and Collars for their input? And I want to thank you all for being so attentive, and if there are any other questions you have,